Welcome to the Explainer. So, you know those pictures you see online? People popping champagne, smiling ear to ear because their offer on a house just got accepted? We've all seen them. But seriously, ask yourself, the offer is accepted, but now what? What actually happens between that excited handshake and the moment you literally get the keys in your hand? Well, let's dive into this obstacle course we like to call the Closing Gauntlet. Because make no mistake, it is absolutely a gauntlet. It's this super high stakes period where teamwork, incredible caution, and let's be honest, a massive mountain of paperwork are the real keys to finally holding those new house keys. We're going to break down the exact steps, the hidden costs, and some pretty surprising legal traps you'll definitely want to watch out for. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the escrow journey, then talk about caveat emptor and disclosures, figure out who pays for what, navigate those tricky final fees, and wrap up with the digital closing revolution. All right, part one, the escrow journey begins. So, the second that purchase agreement is signed, the clock starts ticking. But it's not like you just hand over a giant oversized check to the seller, right? Instead, a neutral third party, usually a title company, steps right in. They essentially act as the referee to protect both you and the seller. This whole escrow process securely holds onto your funds and your documents until every single contractual condition is met. And the very first thing they hold on to? Your earnest money. This is typically a 1 to 3% good faith deposit that basically proves to the seller, hey, I'm serious about this. Now, the first 5 steps of this gauntlet, they happen incredibly fast. You open the escrow account and bam, immediately the title company kicks off a meticulous search of public records just to make sure there are no hidden liens lurking on the property. Then the actual escrow instructions get drafted up. Next is where the heavy lifting comes in for you, the buyer. You're scheduling home inspections to sniff out any hidden defects, getting the lender's appraisal to confirm the property's value, and finally, crossing your fingers for that golden ticket, the lender's final loan approval. Moving into the second half, let's see how this all builds up to the finish line. Once you clear those inspections and appraisals, your contingency periods expire. Then, you do a final walkthrough of the home, mostly just to make sure a pipe hasn't burst since the last time you saw the place. After that, your lender issues a closing disclosure, outlining every single penny of the transaction. Next up is the closing appointment, to sign what feels like a million documents, leading right into the grand finale, the title transfer and recording with the county. At that precise second, the property legally changes hands. Moving on to part 2, caveat emptor and disclosures. Okay, to really grasp this perilous discovery phase, let's look at the state of Virginia. In real estate, there is this old legal doctrine known as caveat emptor, which is basically Latin for let the buyer beware. In states like Virginia, the burden is placed heavily, and I mean heavily, on the buyer to do their due diligence. The seller? They aren't really required to hold your hand and point out every squeaky floorboard or leaky faucet. It means you have to independently verify the property's condition, the zoning, the surrounding environment, all before you sign on the dotted line. Because if you don't, and you find a massive, expensive problem later, well, let the buyer beware. Just take a look at this incredibly specific list of disclosures a buyer is advised to investigate in a state like Virginia. The state legally outlines that sellers make zero representations about these things, meaning it is entirely on you to go find out. Look at this list. You've got to check for nearby military air bases, defective drywall, whether the property sits in a dam break inundation zone, and yes, even whether the house was previously used as a meth lab. No joke. It really hits home why those home inspections during escrow are so absolutely critical. Oh, and the pressure is on a seriously strict timeline here. Say you're buying a property in a common interest community, like a condo building or a neighborhood with an HOA. You are legally entitled to a resale certificate that lays out all the community's rules, finances, and any pending violations. This timeline shows exactly how tight your window really is. The association has up to 14 days to deliver this massive packet of documents. And once you finally get it, you typically only have a tiny 3-day right to cancel the contract if you discover the HOA has rules you simply can't live with. Once that 3-day window evaporates, you were locked in. All right, on to part 3, who pays for what? Surviving the legal traps of the discovery phase is a huge win. But now we arrive at the financial toll booth. Because, as we know, closing on a house isn't just about the purchase price, it's all about those closing costs. So, who actually pays for what? Generally speaking, buyers handle the due diligence costs. You're basically paying for your own peace of mind.
That means footing the bill for the home inspection, the appraisal required by your lender, and the lender's title insurance. On the flip side, sellers typically cover the real estate agent commissions, real estate transfer taxes, and they usually pay for the owner's title insurance to prove they are actually handing over a clean title. And those escrow fees we mentioned earlier, those are typically split right down the middle, often coming out to about 1% of the home's total purchase price.
Part 4. Navigating the final fees. Let's zoom in on the granular data for a second. When you look at a closing disclosure, you don't just see one big generic tax number. Using Prince William County, Virginia, as an example, you can see how closing costs are actually this hyper-specific stack of micro fees. You've got a state tax based on the home's value, then a local tax calculated as a fraction of that state tax, a grantor tax, a clerk's fee that actually fluctuates depending on the physical number of pages in your deed. They even tack on a $5 technology trust fund fee. It perfectly illustrates just how incredibly complex and bureaucratic the actual transfer of property really is. But wait, what happens if you go through all of this and the deal just falls apart? Say you find something terrible during the inspection and decide to back out. Your earnest money doesn't just magically poof back into your bank account. In places like Alabama, state license law actually dictates that real estate brokers holding that money cannot release it unless they have a signed, written mutual release from both the buyer and the seller. If the seller gets mad and refuses to sign, the broker is stuck. At that point, they have to file a court action called an interpleader, literally asking a judge to legally determine who gets the cash. It's a pretty stark reminder that walking away from a deal is rarely as simple as it sounds. Finally, Part 5. The digital closing revolution. Fortunately, if your deal holds together, we are finally crossing the finish line. And the amazing news here is that technology is completely revolutionizing how we actually get there. The days of sitting in some stuffy title office for 3 hours, getting intense hand cramps from signing 100 pages of paper, those days are quickly ending. By utilizing remote online notarization, or RON for short, buyers and sellers can now bypass the physical stacks of paperwork entirely. RON uses secure audio-video technology to connect you with a commissioned notary online. You verify your identity digitally and securely finalize the entire deal via video conference right from your living room couch. And the impact of this is absolutely massive. $444, that is the average amount of money saved per loan simply by utilizing digital closings. When you strip away the printing, the overnight mailing fees, the physical couriers, and the storage fees for literal reams of paper, the savings add up incredibly fast for everyone involved. And it's not just about saving money, though a 20 to 30% reduction in those specific closing logistics costs is huge. Digital workflows can actually shave an entire week off the closing timeline. No more waiting for documents to travel across the country via FedEx. Furthermore, it's actually more secure. These platforms use encrypted video records of the signing session and tamper-evident digital certificates that make document fraud incredibly difficult. As of today, this process is fully legal and operational in 44 U.S. states. It's a total game changer. There is a massive modern toolkit out there for real estate professionals to make this happen. Brokerages can choose platforms tailored perfectly to their scale and needs. You've got giants like DocuSign and Adobe Sign driving massive enterprise operations across the US and Europe. Then you have platforms like eSign Global, specializing in highly complex, cross-border real estate deals, specifically in the Asia-Pacific region, where compliance laws are notoriously strict. And of course, you have streamlined platforms like HelloSign for smaller, independent agencies. The software infrastructure is 100% there to support this digital revolution. So looking back at the journey, the closing gauntlet is undeniably complex. It's expensive, it's legally demanding, and it requires intense due diligence to make sure you know exactly what you're buying. But with a solid understanding of the escrow timeline, a clear awareness of your responsibilities as a buyer, and these incredible new digital tools at your disposal, the question is, are you ready to close, or are you going to let the gauntlet intimidate you? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.